everyone, and welcome to the CSR ESG-based panel today, hosted by Six. I'm joined today by Tony Giardini, Trilogy Metals CEO, Richard Williams, Bunker Hill's Executive Chairman, Bradley Barnett, Bunker Hill's Vice President of Sustainability, Ali Haji, Ion Energy's CEO and Director, and Monica Ospina, Monarca Minerals Director for the board. Today's panelists are going to have a discussion today about the importance of CSR and ESG topics. After, we'll move into a live Q&A session where we'll be accepting and answering some questions. You can submit your questions using the Q&A panel found on the right-hand side of your screen at any time. And as always, this summit is being recorded and will be available to watch afterward on Six.com. So to begin with, I'd like to offer a couple of minutes to each of the speakers to introduce themselves and their companies before we begin in earnest. And Tony, I'm going to hand things over to you to start things off.
Cameron, thank you very much, and welcome to everyone who's joined us today, and thanks to all the panelists for being here. I'm going to be within my 3-minute time period. I only have one slide that I'm going to be talking to, and this slide basically summarizes what Trilogy is. Trilogy is listed on the New York and Toronto Stock Exchange under the ticker symbol TMQ. We operate in Alaska, the great state of Alaska. And what we do in Alaska is we have a 50% interest in an area called the Ambler Mining District. This was an area that was explored for many years by Rio Tinto. And in 2011, my predecessor, Rick Van Nieuwenhuis, the CEO at the time, was successful in putting together the district and effectively partnering up with NANA, which is a native corporation located in the northwest part of the state. And so in 2011, we created this Ambler Mining District of 172,000 hectares that has two significant deposits on it, one called Arctic, which I'll talk about a little bit more in a minute, and the second, which is an advanced exploration project called Bornite. So this was the first time this district has really been aggregated, and having NANA as a partner is very important in that certainly the subject that we're going to be talking about today, ESG and community relations, is key to our relationship with NANA. We have two primary deposits, Arctic and Bornite. Arctic's a VMS deposit. It's 43 million tons at a grade of roughly 4.2% copper equivalent. We released an FS on it in 2020, and based on the FS results, it was $1.1 billion NPV at 8% discount with a 27% IRR. In the frothy or in the copper, zinc, gold, silver price environment that we're in today, that NPV advances to around $3 billion on a 100% basis. Now, we own a 50% interest in this district, and the other 50% is owned by South 32. South 32 came into the project in 2016, investing roughly $30 million in exploration. It was spent over a 3-year time period. And in 2020, we formed the JV where they contributed $145 million into the JV for their 50% interest. The second project that we have that we're looking at is called Bornite. It's about 180 million tons at 1.6% copper, and that's combined between the open pit and underground resources that we have there. We've got a number of exploration targets in the VMS district, and we're advancing those. The next step for us is starting the permitting process on the mine, which we hope to commence later this year or early next. And so we're very excited about the project moving forward. And I'm very keen on engaging in the discussion about ESG and community as we move forward. So Cameron, back over to you. Thank you.
Great, thanks a lot. And with that, I'm going to hand things over to Bunker Hill, and I'll bring those slides up for you now.
Thank you very much, Cam, and thank you for having me and our VP Sustainability, Brad Barnett, on this call. Bunker Hill Mining Corporation is now led by an ESG and technical turnaround team. We're effectively becoming a new mining company focused on creating positive impact and financial value from the regeneration of closed mine sites in North America. As you'll see on the right, we've got a plan to restart the mine, a $143 million NPV project using $44 million worth of capital. It delivers significant and delightful financial returns, but much more importantly in the center, we're going to be doing it in a way that effectively trends towards zero footprint mining, everything done underground, in partnership with a number of non-mining businesses, which I'll show you in a minute, to deliver a significant social impact, not just for the area around the mine, but that particular part of Idaho. And we've got a pipeline of such projects. We're starting with the old Bunker Hill mine, which was a historic lead, silver, zinc mine, producing 165 million ounces of silver in its time, much shallower than the other mines in the Silver Valley, but have already stretched our legs into Colorado, where we've got a joint venture in the London mining district to establish, firstly through exploration, but again, the regeneration of that district itself. Next slide, please, Cam. And I want to say ESG for us is more than just a standard we must live by. It's a key focus. Without actually delivering on our ESG promises, we create no value. And so our core positive impact into this area is delivered, of course, by the restart of the mine, but is multiplied by partnership businesses that are focused on green energy, residential property, leisure, and a range of other areas that Brad Barnett, who is a development economist by training, who I brought into Barrick to manage our closed sites, is energizing for us. So we leverage relationships, partnership, learning from sector best practice and other non-sector best practice to balance the financial imperative, which drives us, with the social and environmental imperatives, and bringing both of those things together to, in our view, deliver not just ESG standards, but ESG impact that will make us stand out. Thank you very much, Cam. Over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. And with that, we'll move on to Ali. Ali, you can take it away.
Thank you for that, Cameron, and a pleasure to be here. Thanks for I'm honored to be a part of the speakers on this panel today. Ion Energy is a company that holds about 110,000 hectares in the country of Mongolia, in the Gobi Desert. So a very sort of arid environment that has very low precipitation and high evaporation rates, very similar to what you would find in the Atacama. We're looking for lithium. We're first movers in country. We've started exploration on the back of our go public transaction in August of last year. And we do hold some of the largest licenses in country in Mongolia. It's evident to us the world is going in an electrical fashion or an electrical direction, and we've that very much checks off the E in the ESG. We have a country and team. We have an in-team country that has had a significant amount of experience in country over the last 12 years. Our exploration position relative to China being the largest market for lithium today, we're only about 24 kilometers from that location. That's one of our key strategic advantages, and beyond that, we are funded for exploration in country. So Mongolia is a country that's not very well understood. I know Tony was the CFO of Ivanhoe, and thank you for that tidbit of information. There is an untapped amount of potential for lithium in country. 20% of their GDP is derived from mining, so there's a lot of skilled labor in country, but as a group, we continue to educate the local community in the mining space to ensure that they're a big part of what we do. In terms of our experience in country, Hunukol was a company that was founded by my chairman, Matthew Wood, in 2010. That was a $20 million IPO on the ASX, ultimately led to a $500 million Aussie exit in 2012. But the important thing there is, there were 100% Mongolian staff. So when he exited, there were 300 people employed by the company, and we're doing everything we can to ensure that we're employing locals. We're not bringing in foreign talent. We're keeping expat numbers low, and we're transferring knowledge as and where necessary. In 2018, a company by the name of Step Gold, of which I was an advisor, that went public on the main board of the TSX. It currently employs about 175 Mongolians. It came to production and declared commercial production using 100% Mongolian staff in June of last year as well. So in the midst of a pandemic, we've been able to train teams in country to bring assets that are ultimately on the brink of world class into production. With Ion Energy, our remit is a bit different. We want to be able to explore lithium in country, work with the local universities to ensure that Mongolia can ultimately end up on the map as far as refining lithium for battery quality, but also for the production of batteries for worldwide use. And last but not least, our cap table, just a bit about it. We control about 25% of the company as management and insiders. And with that, Cam, I'll hand it back to you. Looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Ali. And with that, we'll move on to Monarch Minerals' Monica. Monica, I'm going to load your slides in now here, and feel free to go ahead and introduce yourself and the company.
Yes, hello everybody. Thank you very much for making the time. Well, I'm just going to go very quickly on Monarca. We are a mineral exploration company with operations in Mexico. And right now we start the process of drilling in the north of Mexico. Please, next slide. Okay, so the reason I'm in the board of Monarch is precisely around the S of the ESG. So I'm an expert in social management for 20 years, and we understand that Mexico is a complicated jurisdiction around the social risk, and that's part of the big reason that we are really working around that, and we are taking this very serious. This is next slide, Cam, please. Interesting component about here is that we are very, very close to the border on the U.S., and we just have access to Puerto Palomas, very close to Ciudad Juárez, and you can imagine the amount of risk that sits in Ciudad Juárez in the border. And interesting, our approach to social engagement and early stakeholder engagement has led that we have a project with no risk and full collaboration with communities, regardless of the fact that we have around our area a lot of risk elements that the border of U.S. could bring. So next, please. The approach that we have is basically based on values, and we are working a lot around literally materializing what is transparency in terms of communities, and we have ejidos and community land where we are operating, and we both are very clear about what does it mean and what it doesn't mean. It is a conversation that is difficult to have with communities, a lot about what we can be responsible and where we are accountable and we are not, and the communication is very straight, which in a region where you have the border and so many unfortunate things could happen. Having an operation that is healthy around that, it helps a lot in that. And right now the drilling process is executing in a very positive way. And Monarca is kind of making a difference in a very close area that could be perceived as risk by many. Next. As part of the job, as you can see here you see the concession, and we have 3 areas that are basically in terms of the land access. And interesting enough, we found that the future right now there is a chili plants, and everybody will say like chili powder and chili, it doesn't go with mining. Believe me, this is fantastic for us to happen, because the plant where they process chili for chili sauce is nothing different than when we separate and we process minerals. So it is helping actually for the communities to understand that we are in that what is happening and what could be happening with mining is nothing different than what they do with the chilies that they process. And at the same time, it's a very interesting way to work in collaboration, and they see that agriculture and mining can be together. And with this, is just basically it. And thank you very much for taking a side to Monarch in Mexico.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all for the great introductions. And I think now any attendee in the room is aware of who we all are at this point. I think it's important to start with some of the broad strokes. And I'd like to ask, as a result, a very broad question. But what does ESG and CSR mean for the mining industry? Richard, maybe if you could lead us off on this, I'd appreciate it. Or Bradley.
Oh, I'll start. I'll hand over to Brad in a second if that's okay. But in terms of our look at ESG, just look at Bunker Hill. Bunker Hill got shut in 1981 because of environmental mismanagement. And that happened across the whole of the Western United States when new environmental regulations came in between 1969 and 1980. And what ESG means for the mining industry from the environmental thing is that from the environmental perspective, it's the fact that mining industries are having to operate not just because of regulatory demands, but from demands of the capital markets of society at a higher standard of environmental management than they'd done prior to the 1970s. So ESG for me improves everybody's operating performance and license to operate, and also ensures that mining contributes most where it can through mining as well as recycling to the delivery of the green economy. But there is much more to that in terms of just doing the right thing. There's the methods we use. And if I can ask on to Brad to talk a little bit about the fact that mining must have impact beyond just the mine gate in the social communities. Brad?
Sure. Thanks, Richard. I think Bunker Hill is a good place to start. Richard described some of it, but it's America's second largest Superfund site. And the reason that Superfund sites exist, by and large, is because the environmental challenges and issues generated by mining activities have created, to use the term that economists use, negative externalities, which means that the public has to deal with these things into the long term. What ESG and good ESG practice will mean now going forward is this increased level of performance across environmental, social, and governance, of course, but in the end, a bunch of areas that generate trust between the mining industry and stakeholders, and a better understanding of who the good operators are and who the bad operators are. On another level, I think there's a very positive aspect to the mining industry that many stakeholders really truly don't understand as well as they might. It's that really broad and kind of unique economic multiplier effect that mining brings into social and economic ecosystems. Those are things that I think stakeholders will begin to understand and appreciate in ways that will create a good, productive relationship between communities and the industry.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, Brad. Tony, I was wondering if we could hear your input on this.
Yeah, I don't think an ESG or CSR is anything new to the industry. I think one of the big changes, though, is how people are able to mobilize their views and communicate about the impact of mines or potential mines within their communities. And just with social media and the ability to engage, not just within the local communities, but worldwide, I think for the industry as a whole, we risk our peril of sort of not engaging on ESG or CSR issues and taking those seriously right at the beginning will really impact our social license to operate. So, for example, today Rio Tinto came out with an investor update, and a big part of that investor update was all focused on decarbonization and social license to operate, and really the ability to continue to engage with communities. It was also talking about the business as a whole and profitability and all of those things, but there's a clear recognition that you need to make sure the communities are on side, that they're supportive, and that you're communicating with them on a regular basis. There's also the big challenge of what communities mean. It doesn't necessarily just mean the community that's next to the mine site or the potential exploration area, because the communities that fall outside of that are also thinking about what's in it for me and how do we fit in and how does this impact the environment where we live and where our children are going to grow up. So those are a big part of the considerations. And I think if the industry wants to continue to be relevant, we need to take these issues very, very seriously. You're already seeing something like thermal coal, for example, which is almost an area where lots of thermal coal is being used still, but it's not within public companies, and it's slowly starting to move into private equity because companies can't be seen as being associated with thermal coal because of the carbon issues and climate change issues associated with that. So those are some of the high-level things that I think about with respect to the industry as a whole. Happy to get into a little bit more with regards to Trilogy as we move forward.
No, thank you. And again, there's one other area I think in our discussion that's important. It's the investor perspective. When discussing, going from large company to small company, when trying to understand who's out there and what they expect, I was very persuaded in discussions this week by people that said that the majority of retail investors in the mining industry, and again, apologies to those that aren't covered this way, are aged between 45 and 75 and are male, and are very driven by the financial imperative of mining, the returns that we can deliver by putting good product into the world. But actually, the younger investor is much more driven by the social imperative and the positives of mining. And I think there's a real gap at the moment between what we've been providing to our investors, the financial imperative, and what the future investors, the younger investors, would like to see, which is the social imperative, which we're discussing here at the moment. And I think we're at a point in our history where it's not just the retail investors, but the institutional investors are also asking for this too. And what Tony outlined about the need to emphasize this more and put this up front more is a very good one.
Well said, Richard. And if I could chime in, I very much agree. I think ESG it has been spurned out of what initially was CSR. ESG just builds metrics around it. And for the mining industry, we've now found that those strategics that want to get involved with any company that's in the mining space want to ensure that your ESG model is up to speed and that you are ticking those boxes. As far as the younger investors that you just mentioned, I couldn't agree more. I think with the advent of social media and sort of what we've seen with GameStop and Reddit and all the rest of that, this younger generation is actually a big part of the capital markets today. And I think checking off those boxes to ensure that we are ESG compliant, we're doing all the right things and measuring those things goes a very long way.
Yeah, I would like to jump here, guys. Well, there are a couple of elements that I would really like to add here. In terms of the generation, I cannot agree more. It was more financial driven on the mining, but we have to take into consideration that the purpose of the mining industry before was a little bit under the table. Not many people knew what was the reality of the mining operation. And that is, social media has kind of exacerbated that and make it more public. So we're getting closer and closer to that end user that is putting pressure on that. That is one element. And happens to be that this end user is the young generation carrying an iPhone and being 3 billion people worldwide connected using Facebook and all this, which that gives them a 3 billion times voice to make an opinion and questioning what they are carrying is responsible mine or not. And the other component of the industry is that the industry, we have to be very clear, and the World Bank has been pointed, and the United Nations have been pointed, that there are two industries in the world that it sustains humanity, agriculture and mining. And humanity started with agriculture and mining just make it agriculture more productive and much, much easier when we were able to create tools. And it's nothing different than today. So the right now, the vision around the mining industry is that it's going back to be this tool that the world needs to survive, and is also part of how we're going to make the industry a part of this global sustainability purpose, and knowing that the population is growing and the demand is growing. So it is not only the fact that we are just be nice to communities around us, is the fact that the activity, we are the first part in the supply chain, in the global supply chain. Number two, the responsibility that we take, it just means that it's less conflict in the regions where we are, and the industry is operating in conflicted areas, and sadly, unfortunately, in many cases, in fragile states that they are doing very little in terms of regulation and legislation to help. So the good that we can do in every single site we are is just a drop of hope that we can have a better future in a healthy supply chain.
I think, Monica, you brought up a really key point, something that I think a lot of people forget, especially in urban environments. There are two, when it comes down to it, essential industries, right? There's agriculture and there's mining. Mm-hmm. But mining is an essential industry with an image problem in a lot of ways. And ESG is, I think, helping people to understand, number one, it can be done in a way that's very productive. It's not destructive. But it helps people understand and find the good operators and incentivize people who maybe need to do some improvement in practice and culture to meet the modern standards. And that makes that bridge, I think, that Richard was mentioning for a lot of this younger generation. Maybe we'll get into this later in the discussion, but in many ways, ESG across all industries with the many different standards and certifications that currently exist, it is in a lot of ways, I think that younger generation looks at that alphabet soup as a lot of box ticking exercises, where it simply just verifies that a lot of policies and standards exist and that maybe the policies are being followed to some degree. What that younger generation needs to see is action.
Yeah, and I think that, sorry, Bradley, I really want to jump on that, because in my previous life as a professor, I was dealing with the 20th years old. And it says, I call it the Robin Hood generation, because everybody wants to save the world and go on that crusade. And the point is that the industry has been taking the paternalistic approach to community development, and all of this has been kind of been nice too. But right now, the ESG questions and investors and consumers right now are putting the pressure of saying, what is really what you're doing for humanity? So it's no longer being nice and painting churches and getting computers and take the picture. Now it's like, what is the contribution of mining? And mining is literally here for development. if we go back to the roots. And that is really what will inspire the new generations. And I will tell you that for us, being close to the border, and when we talk about what does it mean mining close to the border in an area that is Mennonites planting chiles, what a mine will do there? Well, a mine is part of the ecosystem in terms of development, and it is becoming a healthy element in such a crazy environment that people can consider getting a job, that it doesn't mean something that is not as legal. So I want to be part of that dignity. So that is the industry. We have the power to bring that dignity in regions in the world where there is no many other options. And that is amazing. When I hear Ali talking about Mongolia, I can only imagine how fascinating it must be operating in Mongolia with these beautiful savannas and the stories behind. How it is a drop of hope jumping in that project. How is a drop of hope in Idaho? And how is a drop of hope? So let's be drop of hopes. And that is what ESG is calling, basically, I think.
I think, and Monica, I think that Monarca is doing some things that are very similar to the opportunity that we identified
Fantastic.
in establishing the company and the brand that we have at Bunker Hill. Is that mining brings a certain amount of capital intensity and generation of economic and social benefits that is in a lot of ways an anchor or a critical mass that you can build around. You're doing it with chili peppers, and Richard showed a very well-developed but kind of detailed slide in our introduction. And we've identified that, the reality is that because this mine is reopening in Idaho in a county that is amongst America's most economically challenged, this now gives liftoff to a whole bunch of other related businesses that will deepen and broaden these triple bottom line impacts that all start with the regeneration of a mine.
Thank you, Brad. Ali, I think you wanted to hop in there.
Yeah, no, speaking about Mongolia and what we've done so far, in terms of the community and the social aspect of things, the sister company that I mentioned earlier, Step Gold, that's one that we're quite proud of as far as engaging the local community and training individuals. So of the 176 people that are employed today, a number of those came from the local community. So the local SUM, Tony would be familiar with that word. And beyond that, we use co-ops to help provide our dairy and our meat. So everything is locally sourced. Everything is locally supplied. You're providing scholarships for the local population. We've also helped build sort of sanitation services and then provide clean water, including drinking wells and that kind of thing. But it's a very fascinating place, Monica. And the people of Mongolia are very hard workers, and they are keen to learn and keen to be a part of the mining ecosystem as well.
Yeah, one of the things that, I think my experience in Mongolia, and one of the keys there for the success of a mining industry is you're going to have Mongolian entrepreneurs ultimately creating their own companies and leading their own companies and developing their own companies, listing those companies on foreign exchanges and accessing foreign capital. That will go a long ways towards really strengthening mining's reputation in Mongolia and the ability to attract investors, and also working very closely with the government. And those are going to be very key, and it's how that transfer of wealth ultimately ends up happening. And that's happened in other communities. We've seen it obviously in the mining industry in Chile and other Latin American communities, but it needs to happen more in places like Mongolia and other sort of frontier environments as companies are going in there.
Yeah. Precisely right. If I could just touch on that for a quick second here. 9% of ION's shares outstanding are owned by Mongolian nationals that were given the opportunity to participate pre-IPO. And we think that it's very important to include the local population as they profit from their own resources. Erdene Resources, which is a gold explorer in Western Mongolia, recently listed on the Mongolian Stock Exchange. Step Gold, our sister company, is looking to do the same, and ION Energy will do that in due course as well. We think it's important to spread the wealth and ensure that it's shared with the local community.
One thing that I wanted to raise in, I saw a story yesterday. It was a tech. They were talking about their $4 billion credit facility, and they had ESG metrics attached to it that impacted the borrowing rates. And, we're all talking about development companies today, exploration development companies. And one of the things that is definitely going to impact us is going to be access to capital. where we've been generally reliant on equity investors to sort of get the company going, and then from there you look to more conventional sources or other conventional sources of financing, debt, et cetera. On the debt side, and particularly project financing, it's going to become a big consideration in terms of how ESG fits in. Yeah. And whether we look at ESG audits or some of those considerations, that's going to be an area where, at your peril, if you're not focused on ESG and thinking about those things, whether it's commercial banks or whether it's other lending institutions or whether it's the World Bank or your EBRD, any of those type of entities, they're going to be thinking about how ESG impacts. And it might impact the borrowing rate, but more than likely what it will impact is their interest in actually being involved with the projects.
Well, I would like
I think that's a very good point.
Oops.
Apologies, Monica. You go first.
I just only want to go so very quickly on what Tony says, because the rating and the evaluation around ESGs, let's be clear, is this project well managed? That's it. That is the question that they want to be answered. And on the other hand, my experience with junior exploration is that not all the time, unfortunately, the funding is there, and they find it very difficult to work on the social ticket. And they might sell the project, and it's a project you cannot operate at all because the conflict around or the conflict created by the project, either by any of the ESG, lack of governance, poor environmental programs implemented, and no social management in place, it just makes it a non-operational project or a project that it lands in the cracks of legal issues, or basically it has no access at all. So I think that the ESG piece is just for all of those stakeholders that Tony mentioned, and totally agree with you, Tony, is just saying, is this an opportunity? Is it really, or is not? And that's what I wanted to say.
I think that's good, and I'll echo some of those 2 points in that, Tony, what one observes in the tech example, but there are other examples too, is effectively the cost of capital can be lower for those that are superior when it comes to ESG method and superior when it comes to ESG impact beyond mining. And I think it's going to be very interesting to see if that trend is sustained and increased, because boy, would it be useful, I have to say. And then the second point on that example is that actually getting non-mining investors, generalist investors, or investors that haven't participated in mining into our capital structures is also going to be very interesting. And I note that Foran, a polymetallic development project in Canada, run by Dan Myerson with Pierre Lassonde and others behind them, managed to pull Fairfax in to great advantage of their equity value and their subsequent cost of capital. And I think it's a challenge that all of us, I only speak for our company, that we take very seriously, is how do we turn a site that was shut for environmental mismanagement and then subsequently remained toxic in the market for 40 years into a position whereby we can bring somebody into the mining industry that's never invested in mining before because they believe in the positive ESG impact that we're doing. It's quite a hard challenge, yes. But it's sort of kind of representative of what we're all trying to do, I think.
I think this has been a great conversation so far. Ellie, sorry, did you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I was just going to chime in very quickly there on the lithium front. Obviously, brines in the Atacama and their evaporation ponds are considered a massive environmental impact, right? You're depleting the water table. You're essentially destroying the environment using evaporation ponds. So the remit at ION anyway is one that will look at direct lithium extraction as the extraction methodology, because you are able to pump 90% of that liquid back into the ground. So yeah, environment is front and center for us, and we do have to work with the environmental ministries in country on a quarterly basis to ensure we have access to exploration and ultimate development and production.
One of the other things that is important, and it's not ESG per se, but it sort of ties to that social license to operate and how people look at mining. And this is coming back to Monica and her comment about sort of original industries, key industries. it's the products that you're producing. So whether it's lithium or copper or zinc, and how we tie that into obviously what's happening with the decarbonization, with the changes to the electric grid. And if you look at Tesla as a perfect example, if someone thinks about Tesla, they think of it, is it an automotive company? Sure, but it's also a high-tech company. And they're also very careful about where they're sourcing their products from in terms of environmentally friendly and thinking about those considerations, whether it's nickel or lithium and how they're accessing that. So as an industry, we're looking primarily to produce copper and zinc, and we have to think about how that ties into the focus on decarbonization, the electric grid, how much more copper, lithium is going to be needed as we move forward in terms of electric vehicles, in terms of infrastructure that's going to be needed to support decarbonization. And those are all important considerations in terms of how we think about ESG and how we message ESG to investors, and in terms of getting outside of that 40 to 70-year-old age group that Richard was mentioning, in terms of a typical type of investor, and attracting new investors and people seeing that these products need to be produced. And yes, of course, we need to have scrap and recycling and all of these things, but it's not going to be enough to meet the demand that's out there for these critical metals going forward.
Precisely right. I mean, the clean green energy revolution is underway. We've seen that with all the government spending in the last year and a half or so. The EU, 750 billion euro, assigned 4 billion of that over to electrification, and then Biden's $400 billion plan as well. So mining, yes, we are considered the evil in sort of any supply chain. We tend to be looked at as folks that are destroying the environment. But without being able to move to electrification, you do need to mine for lithium. And a good example for Mongolia is that 100% of their power comes from coal. If you've been to Ulaanbaatar, which I'm sure Tony has, in the wintertime, you can taste the soot in your teeth. That's how much coal they burn to power the city. So moving the Mongolian economy from one that has been burning coal to one that is now using electrification and sort of lithium batteries for storage, wind power, etc., is really the direction we want to go to. And I think using the right ESG tactics and methodologies will allow us to get there and get rid of that evil badge that we currently wear.
Thank you all for the great discussion so far. I'm wondering if we could, from the perspective of investors, what is the benefit of investing in ESG and CSR compliant mining companies? Ali, maybe you can bring us right back with that if you're ready.
Sure. I'll echo Richard's statements. You look at what's the benefit for an investor. The younger generation, as we've discussed currently, is now looking to ensure that those boxes are being checked. So as an investor, why would you invest in a company that has no ESG mandate in place? The retail investors will not follow. Your liquidity will likely diminish. And as a result of that, you need to ensure that you do have the mandates and the necessary structure in place for investors to even look at you as a potential investment opportunity.
I think maybe to add to that, Ali, Cam, if I could, good ESG performance, I think, for investors and capital markets really in the end is about better risk management across a whole spectrum of risks and better long-term financial and business performance, right? So ultimately, if ESG standards and certifications do what we need them to do, that's what it should be telling capital markets.
Agreed.
Right. Maybe Tony, you could take this, your perspective on this. I know that you were mentioning just the age ranges.
Yeah, to me, it's about relevance. Basically, let's assume you've got a project that makes sense and it ticks a lot of the other boxes. If you don't have compliance on the ESG front, you don't have relevance. And I think about it from a micro perspective within the local communities, because when we look at the title of the discussion, it's about local communities. You have to have relevance within those communities. So the communities have to be supportive of what you're doing, and they have to be engaged and keen on the benefits that they're going to receive, whether it's through employment opportunities, whether it's through sharing of the economic wealth that's going to be created. But those are going to be key factors. And I can tell you, it's not something you can take your eye off of. You can't sit there and say, oh, I've got an ESG checklist, and I've done all of the things necessary. You have to continue to engage. So in our communities where we're operating in the northwest part of Alaska and the Ambler Mining District, it's really about subsistence, subsistent hunting and fishing, which is very key in our communities. And we have to continue to engage with the communities and explain to them how the mine development that will ultimately, hopefully happen within that area will or will not impact subsistent hunting and fishing. And those are the concerns of the communities in our case. So for us, it's about relevance, and that's how we're thinking about it.
Well, if you allow me, Cam, I will add on this that basically each environment it's very different, and we need to take that into consideration. The reality that Tony lives in Alaska is far different from Mongolia and far different from Ohio, and beyond different from dealing with the border of the U.S. in the case of Monarca. And that is one of the elements here. Good social management, it just goes beyond the engagement piece. And good social management just will tell investors and will tell even the communities, not beyond the benefits. It's the opportunity to participate, it's the opportunity to have a voice, to raise their concerns, to, for example, in the mine design, this is a component that many times the mining industry is a little bit fearful to talk about the tailings and where the tailings should be. And actually, when you make it in a participatory process, the communities will be saying and telling you where they are okay to have the tailings. And that is the perfect answers you want beyond the engagement piece. And that make it that successful. So the communication and that piece of engagement with communities is just big part of how is social management. And that is what will make the industry sustainable. How we can really work together with the neighbors and how honest we are in terms of acknowledging the impacts that we have as an industry in the region where we operate.
Yeah, great point, Monica. I mean, it's turning that corner from engagement to involvement of stakeholders, right?
Yeah.
If I could just touch on Udam Hundi, which is a nice.
Let's
Carry on, Richard.
if you wouldn't mind going first, and then Richard will follow up with you.
I'll be quick, Richard. I'll be quick. With Udam Hundi, which is a license held by our sister company, Step Gold, that's in Bayan Hongor province. And what we did there when we were obtaining that license, we essentially offered the government of Bayan Hongor an 80-20% JV, where they hold 20% of all resources on that asset, and ultimately will profit 20% alongside the company. So that's one way that we find you can obviously better the lives of the locals and involve them, and it's quite measurable. I mean, when the company starts producing revenue based on those assets, the economic impact will be quite clear to the community as well.
No, thank you. And again, just to sort of echo the definition of community beyond those that you're going to employ or those that live around the mine also extends to other partners we find. Go back to Bunker Hill, was shut down by the US government effectively, and the Environmental Protection Agency tidied everything up and manages the water. And we see the EPA as part of that community. When we're seeking to build this mine, we're going to do it in ways that has no footprint, underground processing, underground tailings deposition, and so on. But even with those techniques copied from elsewhere, you've still got a community that's very nervous about what mining will deliver, given its history. And so we have to sort of communicate with every party that has an interest in here and demonstrate by bringing others in what benefits beyond mining can happen, because our mine will shut at some point. Currently, our plan is for 11 years, but we can see 40 years worth of mining. And so what we're trying to demonstrate to our community is a multi-generational mining opportunity, but that spins off other businesses. And I'd like Brad to talk about how he's brought in non-mining partners to deliver waste-to-energy projects, biochar projects, and so on. That means that actually the high schools that are going to be providing us workers are also going to have opportunities to participate in a local green economy that's completely different to what their grandfathers saw. So Brad, talk a little bit about that and how you communicate that, because you're the guy on the ground with the communities, because I think that's quite instructive about what we've learned elsewhere and what we're trying to bring here. Brad? Yeah,
I mean, I think, Monica, you brought up something that is a real key point. Every community is different. You have to get to know your community intimately, understand who they are, what opportunities exist, what their challenges are, what their worries are. In this environment, as Richard was just mentioning, Shoshone County is economically challenged in many ways. It's a place that is steeped in mining history. Some of the best and most highly skilled miners in American mining are from that environment. But it's a place where mining, through the environmental challenges over the years, has gradually dissipated and began to disappear. Bunker Hill regenerates that opportunity for employment, but at the same time, there are other opportunities. They're spending 15% of their annual budget to dispose of waste in Montana. That's trucking and tipping fees. It not only does it put a big dent in their fiscal coffers, but generates pretty significant carbon footprint. We have the opportunity now that the mine is opening and can serve as this anchor client to consume a lot of the power for waste to energy, to bring in industry experts with both the operational expertise and development capital to create that plant that saves 50,000 tons a year in carbon emissions, provides the mine with cheaper power, generates greater employment in the county, adds feasibility to a whole host of other businesses in the local environment, and it saves the county a good amount of money. In addition to that, you have things like that electricity not only goes to the mine, but we can apply it to a whole host of real estate development projects. The mine adds 150 new jobs into the local environment, but in general, it's a county that has a massive undersupply of housing. Once we add that housing, not only for our own needs, but for the broader economic environment, that then adds feasibility for entertainment, retail, and recreational real estate to develop on the back of that. And so there's this cascade of different benefits that come from not only recognizing the opportunity of regenerating the mine through both addressing the environmental challenges, taking on a long life, low impact, margin approach, but just in the end, understanding the ecosystem and the community.
Thank you, Brad. We have had a question come in from Giles live. He asks, how do you as companies rate your communications with local communities? What support do you have in place to better your employees' capability to factor in community communications into their regular work pattern? Maybe Ali, if you wouldn't mind, or if anyone actually wants to leap in on.
Sure. The local SUM, which essentially is call it a municipality within a province. You have to work with the local SUM in order to not only get access, but we do have to manage those relationships, as Bradley so rightly pointed out. We do that on a monthly basis. We have a local representative that's part of the company. We're headquartered in Ulaanbaatar, which is the capital. But with our Babayul license at 81,000 hectares, I'm sure you can imagine that's a significant chunk of land. And so we do have to meet with the local population on an ongoing basis. We have regularly scheduled meetings to ensure that we have access to not only areas of the license, but we're asking the local community exactly what they require from us as a company, what we can do to do things better, what we can do to ensure that we're not as intrusive, but also the fact that we're looking to employ locals and train them and provide them with a skill set that they can potentially use in the future.
Yeah, well, I saw the question, and thank you, Giles. And I think that the way that you can really rate a good quality communication is when you have an open dialogue and collaboration is happening. That is it. It is no A, B, C, or A plus. It is when collaboration, the communities are really ready to jump on projects with you or be part of the project. That's when you have a quality communication. And that will be literally linked to the stakeholder engagement and goes to the social management. In terms of your employees, employees are ambassadors and they wear two hats. They are community when they are at home, and just always keep in mind that they make comments at the dinner table, and their mamas and their wives and sisters and daughters and sons, they will be mini ambassadors telling if the experience was good or bad. So if we are having a bad experience in the mine, you can tell you have 5 stakeholders ready to speak bad about you after school or during a school time or after church or during church. So you have 5 stakeholders that either support you or not, just by having one employee who are respectfully treated and see the benefit of working with you. So I think that these numbers are multiplying and just kind of showing that the impact we have in communities is just beyond what we are expecting as an industry.
Absolutely. just being cognizant of time, we've also had another question come in from Kevin. Tony, I'd like to pitch this to you to hear your words on it first. Does the majority of the industry recognize the importance of ESG and the acceptance of it from an investor standpoint, or do you think that there's opposition?
I think there's been a big change and a big focus on it. I don't think there's opposition. I think people understand that ESG needs to be at the forefront in terms of how we look at communication and how we move forward. And I think it comes back to a comment I made earlier where ESG and CSR has been around for a long time. I think it's just repackaged and how we're looking at it and how investors are looking at it. And I think one of the things that is going to ultimately happen is going to be how people look at being ESG compliant and how we benchmark ourselves against that. So there's a bigger focus for sure, but I don't think it's something that companies are not thinking about. Before I hand the question over to someone else, I just do want to add one thing to the communication side. One of the big challenges for companies, like all the companies represented here, has been COVID this last year. One of the keys for all of us is you want to get out into the communities and you want to meet with people and you want to have face-to-face dialogue. So it's been very difficult for us to be able to engage with the local communities directly. So a lot of our engagement has been virtually through town halls, through we deal with the Northwest Arctic Borough, which represents the communities in and around where the mine is slated to be created. But hopefully, as things are starting to move forward, we'll be able to get out to the communities more and do a lot more face-to-face engagement, because I think that's going to be a key part of how we tell the story within the communities moving forward. So, Cam, back to you.
If I may just add a little bit. Yeah, just on community, we have excellent points made by everybody. It's a great question, Giles. Is when we took on the project, community and all of its sensitivities, just like in any mining site, was obviously very important to manage. And one way in which we had an advantage was that Sam Ash, who we made the CEO, who had been running very effectively and optimizing our Lumwana copper mine in Zambia. Turned out his father had worked on the mine in the 1970s. And so when he took on the job, he flew down to the mine site, bought a house there, and lives 5 minutes walk from the mine site. So he became part of the community. Brad also, although lives in California, is spending 70 or 80% of his time in and around the community. So we actually had to embed ourselves in the community as a corporation in order to try and win the argument, which is a tough argument to win. That what we're going to do is going to be into everybody's interests, and we don't get it right all the time. I've got to say, you're learning as you go, like you are in any relationship. But Brad, talk a little bit about how you find it, please.
Yeah, and I think a big part of effective communications with local community is taking it beyond formal process and becoming part of the community. I mean, a big part of our approach to reopening Bunker Hill Mine, as Richard mentioned, is Sam and I living there full time. And, it isn't just discussing the business of the mine with the city council, but it's running into people at the supermarket and talking to them about when we're going to start hiring again. There's a whole range of different things that need to happen as both on the level of developing trust and understanding to being able to take action as people need it and want it when you're there and you're inside of that community. But it's paid off tremendously, not only with the local stakeholders in and around Kellogg, but it's also increased our access to and our dialogue with key regulators like the EPA, where I think in the past they had gone years, maybe even decades, without communicating with the mine operator at Bunker Hill. We speak to them on average about 4 hours a week.
Amazing. Thank you.
I would like just to add one token here is that the industry understands ESGs. Yes. I mean, in my career as a social scientist, I have never seen more socially conscious people than geologists. They drink the water, they sleep in those areas, they walk the areas, and they work with communities. Nobody better than a geologist. Does the other side, the corporate side of the industry, understand ESGs? Big question mark. Do the lawyers understand? Do investors understand? Do financiers understand how connected they are? I think that we need more geologists telling their personal stories, demonstrate how cool they are. And they really understand that. That's it.
Thank you. In the interest of time, I wish we could keep going. I think this has been an amazing conversation. I do want to be able to go around the room with a quick 1 minute long wrap-ups talking about if there's anything on the horizon for each of your companies for upcoming ESG or CSR initiatives. But to the audience members, that is really all the time we have scheduled for today. And I'd like to thank everyone in attendance, all of the presenters and everyone in the attendee group. If you didn't get a chance to ask a question, or if you think of one after the summit, or if we weren't able to quite get to it, we'll be passing along these questions to the speakers who'll be able to answer it on their own time. We'll also be sending out some short surveys where you can leave your contact information and get into direct contact with any of the companies represented here. And with that, again, I'd like to go around the room one last time. Monica, I'd like to start with you just a minute about any upcoming initiatives.
Well, I appreciate that. Ladies first. Okay, Monarca. So, well, we are in Mexico. We are managing the risk in an extraordinary way. And I think that it is from Monarca, we really tried really hard from the board to make sure that we have a healthy junior exploration company that can pass the torch to development. And that is where we really want to be. Thank you very much for attending and for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. Ali, I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you, Cam. For us, ESG, a bit of diversity, I think, will go a very long way. Half my board is Mongolian, but we're looking to add some more diversity to our board. We're also now employing a local Dorn Govi province community specialist that can work with the community and essentially allow us to progress that project as well. So we're looking forward to the year ahead. And again, thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you. Richard, Brad, I'm going to hand things over to you now.
Thank you. I'll quickly say we're going to restart Bunker Hill Mine, and that's going to generate a series of spin-off green businesses. Brad, talk about those.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, not only do we have a low-impact mine with underground milling, processing, water treatment, and paste backfill that solves the long-term environmental challenges at the time of closure for that mine, whenever it happens. But in the near future, we fly into action with creative green power initiatives. We have satellite monitoring of biodiversity impacts. We have real-time access from public data to provide radical visibility and transparency. And we have the build-out of the broader economy with a whole range of real estate initiatives.
Wonderful. Thank you, Bradley. Thank you, Richard. And Tony, I'm going to hand things over to you.
Well, what I'd like to do is actually thank our partners up in Alaska. I'd like to thank NANA. Today's actually the 10th anniversary of signing our agreement with NANA. NANA is a regional Alaska Native corporation. It was formed in 1971 under the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act. And we entered into a partnership 10 years ago with NANA. We've got an oversight committee where we work with them. We've got regular representation from both NANA and the company and Ambler Metals, which is a JV, to review our plans, activities on the project. There's an option for NANA, similar to what Ali was talking about, to participate in the development of a project. They can either do that through a net profit interest of 15% or direct interest in any of the mines that are developed in the area. There's a commitment on our part to promote employment with NANA shareholders. They've got 14,000 residents up there that they call shareholders, and also to focus on hiring and contractual opportunities with NANA. So I just want to thank NANA and the Northwest Arctic Bureau for being our partners in the project, and I look forward to further updates on Trilogy and the Ambler Mining District, and thanks to SIX for the ability to participate in this very interesting discussion.
Well, thank you. And again, I'd like to reiterate my thanks for everyone here coming on and speaking. With that, I think, though, we are going to wrap up. Thank you, everyone in attendance, and thank you all for coming on again. I hope everyone has a good rest of their day, and cheers.
Thank you so much. Thank you, guys.
Thank
Nice
you.
to meet you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.